Okay, so I'm going to just cover the general rules with the non-concessional contribution cap and specifically the 3-year bring forward method and how it's applied to one of our clients just in a couple of months ago. So can anyone tell me what, and I should have brought my coaching, what the non-concessional contribution cap is? Yep. And non-concessional contributions being? What are they?
Those that no one getting production control.
Yep, yeah, that's a good way of doing it. And so what's the 3-year bring forward method? Yes, and that's over, so it's 3 years. So in a 3-year period, and we'll use this client, we're looking at the...
Chris, that bring forward, does it apply to everyone?
No, you've got to be over 52. Is it 3 years before you actually...
Any other takers?
Scott's the closest so far.
50.
In going up.
70.
Down.
62.
65.
Thank you.
Yeah, so 3-year bring forward method is a bit of a recap. So ordinarily you can put in 150 per year, or for example you could put in at 450, and that would apply for those 3 years. Do you need to put in the 450? Are there any other options for using this 3-year bring forward cap?
Go less than 450. But that's the maximum.
Yep, so what do you need to do to trigger this 3-year bring forward method?
Go over 100.
Yep, so you could go over, like it just needs to be like $1, or you could put in say 151, and then the next year you could put in 150, and then the 149, so the total's still 450. That's another approach to it. So we had a client who was looking to set up a super fund so we're in May, June 2012. And he has a fair few investments outside of super currently. So we're looking at the option of transferring one of those investments into super to get the benefits of the lower tax rates in super, and he was over 60. So what does that mean for someone that age? What's another benefit of super?
Well, that tax-free.
Yep, yeah, pension, that's right, and they can get it out tax-free. And what does that mean for the fund itself if you're drawing a pension?
No earnings on the assessment.
Yep, that's right. So there's a huge benefit getting it in there for tax-free, basically. For all the earnings being tax-free. So given he had a fair bit outside of super, we'll be pushed for time, so we're thinking, well, should we be working towards 30 June or just wait until July? So what are some of the factors that we might consider as to moving, and he had more than 150,000 in investments outside super he could have put in. So what are some of the considerations in whether we try and rush before 30 June or just hold off until July?
Once you trigger it, it's activated for 3 consecutive years. So if he thought that he'd have other investments that were beyond that 3-year scope that were 400,000, he wouldn't activate it now, because then he'd be locked in to either bringing those forward or missing out down the track.
Yep, yeah, so that's right, it's looking at, well, how much can you get in as early as possible. So, and I think from memory it was about 400, I think, roughly for him. But yeah, if you had 450, just as Scott said, you could potentially get in 150 this year and then 450 for June and then 450. But he had less than 450.
I
So
would
would that
think
still
the
be the
setting
same?
up the fund costs and processing costs for another financial year would come into it.
Yeah, that is a consideration as well. Yeah, definitely. But then in, I suppose, the context of just getting as much into super as possible. So if you had less than 450, would the option of staying under the 150 cap still be the preference?
I'd say go with 150. See what happens. If you got more than 450 to use up in future years.
Or just trying to think of other considerations too. Well, one of the restrictions we had, because as I mentioned, it was over 60. I think one of the other things that, because what we actually went with was triggering the 450, so that it would finish earlier. Because I think the 65 was. So the earlier he finished this 450, then there's opportunity to then do another 450 at a sooner date. So if you went 150, then 450, that's only 600 over those 4 years. But if you did 450 here, or triggering 450, then you could potentially get 900,000 within 4 years. So that was the reasoning we went with. So other places where this could apply for clients as well is, well, that 65 date is significant. So does anyone know what happens, say, if you're 64, and let's use this scenario as an example, say 64 at this date, and then 65 here, what does that mean for the 3-year bring forward method? Can you continue putting in up to the 450? Does anyone know?
No.
I don't know, I'd say you'd probably have to put in May 65th birthday.
All you have to do is trigger it before your 65th. So as long as you've triggered it, then even though you're over 65 in the remaining couple of years, you can still put in up to the 450. So that's another time when you might want to do this triggering of the 450 if you know, for example, they might be selling their business in a couple of years' time and want to put in a large sum then. If you have the cash available, you might want to trigger it there, or say it's in the next year. Then you can get the majority of it in at that date. It's in a tax-free environment longer rather than having to spread it out 150 per year. And that was another consideration with this client too. The earlier we could get it in, then the longer it would be in a tax-free environment for as well. So yes, I think that's it. Any questions?